Good afternoon and welcome to this week's episode of Level Up Cyber Live. My name is Tony Bryan and I am your host. And today I'm really excited about the discussion. I think it's one of note. You know, everybody gets asked, what is your why often? Simon Sinek has made an incredible career out of the idea of what is your why. So excited to dive into that today with our guest, Marc Ashworth. So Marc, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me. Been watching the past episodes and everything, and looks like fun, and sounds like a good topic here for us to talk about to try to get people into the business. So,
so you and I have been hanging out. We've done panels together and discussions. I don't know, at least 6 or 7 years at this point, and you've always been a great leader. A great individual just regionally, and that's the support of the cybersecurity ecosystem, which I appreciate. And I think you've just been a great mentor to many folks and have really helped grow and shape the cybersecurity industry, not just in St. Louis, but beyond. So I know you really well, but I'd love everybody else to get to know you at the same level. Tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get into this crazy world of cyber? And we'll start there.
Cool. Yeah. And yeah, I think we had our first presentation about 7 years ago in front of a bunch of people, and which was a lot of fun. We kind of tag teamed it. So yeah, I've been in the business.
Was it the one I think we hacked? Sorry, was it the one I think we hacked them in the background with Wi-Fi pineapple, I think with some folks. I think we'd set up a pineapple to collect some data there. If I remember correctly.
Yeah, and I think it was over in Illinois. We were at like some industry event thing, and we were talking about cyber, and you were talking about the things that you're doing and getting people into it and stuff. And I remember there were politicians there. There were tons of businessmen there. It was a really cool event, and I think it took about another hour to get out of there because of all the questions that from everybody by the time it was done. So it was a lot of fun. But I've been in the business for about 30 years now, a little over 30 years. And I got into it after watching a little movie called War Games that really got me going and really wanted me to get into technology and security and that sort of things. And really kind of came up the ranks from development to networking and systems, and been in management for many years and was a technical manager. So I was up late doing the updates and all the other stuff, so I know the pains of the administrators as they do it. And I've always liked the security side of it, and then I've been blessed here at First Bank with all the supportive leadership and really helped me grow, even more so. One of the things I really enjoyed is getting out there and talking about it, kind of evangelize the security industry and talking to, a lot of the, our colleagues out there, in other businesses, and then those that are coming up. And I get a lot of people asking, how can I get into this, or what do I need to do? And when you approach me about doing this, it's like, let's talk about the why. Why do we want to get into this? And because frankly, it's a lot of fun. It's challenging, and it's also rewarding because you can be one of the good guys without having to walk the streets and carry a weapon and all the other stuff like our wonderful police and fire department and stuff does. So they're obviously the true heroes, but it is nice to know that we're here to help protect the organizations, protect people, and from the cyber threats, and be part of that.
So I'd be remiss not to ask, what's your why, right? And I have my own of what I like this, but what has been your why and kind of passion for this sector?
Yeah, it's definitely been around the challenge. I've always been a change advocate. And, when I was in IT leadership and CIO roles and stuff to bring change to the organization. And, I've always embraced it. And the one thing with cyber and security is it is constantly changing, so if you don't like change, then you might have a little problem with cyber. But it's just really a lot of fun, and just knowing that something is going to be different today than it will be tomorrow, and to try to find out what that is, and then to look for it, and then for me to strategically plan for what might be down the road, uh, makes it a lot of fun. But then just working with the security teams, the analysts, the engineers, and everything to plan with them and to watch the threats, and balancing what's happening in the physical world to try to determine what's going to happen in the cyber world, and just all that to me is just really exciting, and it's not boring. If I am at a position, and if it gets boring, yeah, I'm going to be clocking out, and this position is far from boring. So that's for me, that's good. It's not the same old thing day after day after day.
Well, I mean, it's funny because there's a sentiment that I know I've shared with our team. The industry's been around. I don't know how long. What would be your assumption around like specific infosec community? 15 years total.
Yeah, I would say 10 to 15. Really, I mean, obviously it's always kind of been there, but it's really kind of started to transform, and you really started to see the need for security in the business, really, I think, in the last 10 to 15 years. And it's still really being embraced by businesses, even large scale, because, as you see it, there was a recent Krebs article that came out this week that 4 out of the, 5 or 10 or whatever, top 10 of the Fortune 10 only has CISOs listed on, or CSOs listed as their executive team. So there's definitely a lot more growth there, and awareness, and really bringing this position up into those same ranks, and it'll get there. It's got to, especially as the SEC is driving it, the White House is driving it, Congress, and a stock market, and the board, it becomes more aware of it. They're going to drive that more and more, which puts current CISOs in a really good position, and likewise their teams to follow along.
But it's the one thing that I feel like never gets talked about enough. It's just really the inherent risk, right? That we all, corporation is doing, or an individual. And like, I think that would be my why, right? Like, where there is a mission oriented aspect of the role, where there's, you're doing, to your point, and it's not formal law enforcement, of course, but it's you're protecting folks or protecting data for a corporation. Like, I do like that mission. Mission-oriented side, and I also think that there's the word that has become more and more important to me as I've gotten older, and I've seen it just resonate with people over the years. It gives you purpose, right? You're not looking at a spreadsheet, and I look at spreadsheets all the time, but when you do look at those things, you're probably investigating something. There's a purpose behind it, and it gives you a little bit larger call to action. So in the grand scheme, right, there's, we've seen the data, there's 600,000, 700,000, whatever the heck the number is today, right? It changes. It's a moving target. What words or advice or piece of advice you give to folks that are, the tens of thousands of people that are either in a boot camp, a college program, or an apprenticeship program, to help them find their why? What advice would you give to those folks?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is get those basic skills, and don't be afraid to apply for a position, an entry level position, or even if it's saying 2 to 5 years or something along that line, apply for that position. A lot of it's around networking. Networking helps. Obviously, if you have a good network connection to get into an organization, that always helps. But really, being passionate about security at whatever level that you're at is important, and that's what I look for when I'm hiring for someone. If someone is passionate, they're showing that they're learning, that they're trying to learn, I will take that over someone that is just going through the motions to find another job. And if you go into the job or into the interview and say, hey, I keep up on security, I'm listening to these podcasts, I'm looking at these articles, magazines, on a regular basis. I'm checking the news and trying to see on how that might affect, cyber. Those sort of things is showing that there's interest in it. And then from there, when you get into the organization, it's really kind of wide open because there's so many different areas to go to. And if you're in a smaller organization on a smaller team, you really get a large view of a lot of different things. You might be working on network security and then systems and then software, and you might be doing threat intel, um, analytics, all those sort of things that get you into there. And then from there, you can, after you get a couple years under, you could say, okay, I really like pen testing. I want to start learning about pen testing and start rolling out that way. Or I understand coding, so both pen testing and software security. I want to learn more about that, and so it really gives you the ability to really stretch your wings really and figure out where you want to go. And you might be a generalist and to where you're good with all these sort of things. And that's fantastic because small organizations need it. And that also helps you as you move forward into, your management ranks too, because then you could talk to different groups. But being able to talk to people is going to be a big thing because you have to have those conversations. And depending on your position and your what you're doing, on the security team, being able to say, hey, this isn't right, and this brings the organization at risk by you doing this, and we need to do it this way and this way. It shouldn't be a hard no. It should be no, but, and that but should help guide those people into where the things need to go. And if you can't get to that but, then it's a matter, okay, your manager or who's going to accept that risk and sign off on that, that, is going against what security is recommending. And because if they're willing to accept that, then that's fine. So maybe.
Yeah, that's great advice. So I was kind of scouring the list of people who are kind of tuning in with us today, and there's a lot of new folks, right? That are just recently jumped into the sector. So I'm always interested, right? There's so many roles within cyber, right? And of course, we all, we're all told that SOC and pen testing is where it's at, right? You got to do the uber technical stuff to be a cool hacker and wear the hoodie. But like you and I both know, there's a ton of other jobs in the sector that are out there that are available. Like what advice would you give to somebody recently maybe got that first job or trying to break in to like figure out where I fit, right? Like I want to find my way, but like with 40 different functions in InfoSec, how do I find my why and pick my battle of where I think I want to specialize in?
Yeah, start out in an analyst job, because what that's going to do is that's going to get you to where you're seeing what the threats are as they're coming in and get you into that investigative mode, because really cyber experts are investigators is what they really kind of turn out to be, because they become very good troubleshooters to try to figure out what's happening on this system. And and in a smaller organization, that gets you into instant response. And if you're in there even on the analytics and working on maybe the SIM and looking at the alerts and working on those alerts, as you're working those alerts, you're learning how systems are doing what they're doing and what's appropriate behavior and not. And so you can quickly, as you embrace that, you'll continue to learn, broadly on the various systems, whether it's a Windows server or a PC or a switch or a router or whatever it might be. And that'll help you get those understandings where then you can start seeing, okay, hey, I really like looking at network security. And so I really like looking at the TCP packets as it's coming across and looking at the headers and trying to find out the anomalies within there. Or I really like looking into the threat intelligence side. I like to go out and play out on the dark web and try to see what's happening. Now, granted, you don't want to do that in the business without that being sandbox and everything, but and other controls. But it really gets you to where you're understanding the organization and how systems are working, and then allows you to build up from there. So, if you're really looking into getting started, look at an analyst job, a junior analyst, whatever it might be, or even a help desk. A help desk is a great way in as well. It might be not be directly in security, but it's getting you to where you understand how to troubleshoot various systems, and then that becomes then a bridge into security, because you understand how to troubleshoot, and that troubleshooting is the same as doing an instant response, because you're learning how the system works and where to go to look for clues on what might be happening.
Prior to us jumping on here, we had the conversation around kind of hopping from place to place, right? And if you paid it yesterday, I don't remember which article went out on, but there was this idea of squiggly careers. I don't know, it was a concept I'd never heard of until yesterday, right? Where everybody wound up being a TED talk, where everybody had this very linear thing, right? You go here, you do 2 years, you get the job, you move up break the glass ceiling, or move up the corporate ladder. But then there's just really this idea around squiggly careers that they're not linear, and everything just kind of just circles around and you jump through. That there's pros and cons to that, right? In terms of consistency with an organization. So what advice would you give to somebody on the idea of maybe squiggly careers and job hopping, or consistently staying in one place? And we'll tie it back to your why, so that way you can really kind of hone in on to your specifics of why you want to be in the space.
Yeah, I think early on in people's career, you'll see a lot more of that job hopping. And back when I first got into the business, salaries dropped really bad because of there was a lot of layoffs in tech. This was early 90s, and so the only way to really, get your salary up really good was to job hop, every, 18 months, 2 years. But after a period of time, you got to stop doing that. After, a few years of doing that, you need to kind of settle in, because one, you're not truly learning the technology and what's happening, or more importantly, you're not getting to where you can understand how a business might run. And so as you are hopping along off of there, after a period of time, that becomes more of a negative. So, the goals to try to get to an organization, one that you're happy with, and it's going to challenge you, and then also provide a good work-life balance. I think that's important. And then finally something that's going to pay your bills and help you save, and eventually get to retirement, right? This is what I think most of us wants to get to. So, that'll come. And then it all depends on what your drive is. And so if your drive is to progress in your career, excluding money, the money will come along with it, and the positions will come along with it. And if you're in the right organization, you'll have that ability to move up, or to at least progress in job title, and take on additional responsibilities. But it's going to take a little time. And I mean, I have people where they're, this is really kind of their first job, and now they've been there 4 or 5 years, and I hope they continue to stay, because we're continuing to grow them in their position, and to where they're learning more and more about security, about technology, about the business. And I think as long as, you keep challenging your staff that way, then you'll keep that retention on there. And the money's out there. Anyone can go and probably make more money at another position, but will you be as happy as that position? And all jobs have issues. You just trade issues whenever you hop to another position, to another organization. And so just keep all that in mind. The longer you stay, the better your opportunity to grow, the more you learn, which then makes you in turn more valuable. And if you're adding credentials on there, your certifications and stuff, then that helps you as you continue to go through, because then future employers will look at you as being a stable employee, and not someone that's going to be there for 18 months and then go somewhere else after they just invested time in you to to learn their organization.
I think that's a great example and sentiment, and I think it shows the importance of why your why is important, right? Money's fantastic. We all like money, right? I mean, don't get me wrong, I like money because it allows us to do the things we want to do. Vacations, trips, I don't know. We all didn't win the lottery last week, whatever, $1 billion in the lottery. I'm sure everybody like, if you're making decisions exclusively off the idea of how much I'm going to make, oftentimes, and I think you hit it pretty well, is you're going to go to an organization that maybe doesn't have your best interest in it, or is going to make investments into you to continue to learn and grow your skills, or provide a supportive management environment where you have a little bit of structure, like a First Bank or organizations like that, where you're going to have, great leaders that support you, invest in you, and give you the things, and you get kind of full scope. And I think finding that balance of like money and the value you put into the work that you do every day and the team that supports you is a really important kind of aspect behind it. So I've generally prioritized job satisfaction and happiness over money. And what has happened over the long run is the money eventually comes, and you can have a balance of both, right? So we did have we had a question from the listeners here. So do you, with Peggy Barnes, so do a higher percentage of people get hired through networking versus through traditional means like LinkedIn or Indeed?
Well, the last person I hired, I was walking through a conference, and the lady came up and introduced herself to me and said, "I'm trying to get into the business. If you have a position open, great. And if not, what can I do?" And that sort of things. So networking definitely helps. And if you can get in front of those hiring leaders like this lady did, it could be beneficial. I think anytime that we can take a referral from somebody, or know someone and bring them in, those are usually more successful candidates, and then the retention is usually better because when they come in, they have someone they know, and then you have a good reference of what type of work character that they are, and the integrity they have and everything. So that's always super helpful. Otherwise, recruiting or online, the big thing. One thing that I've seen, which is really disappointing over the last couple of years, especially since COVID, is people overinflating their resume. And I mean, it's always happened, so don't get me wrong. But if you're putting on your resume that you've done this, the expectation is that you're an expert in it or a near expert, and you better be able to answer questions about it and do it in a first person and not in a we did this or we did that, because when you start throwing in that we, then they're going to dig in further to try to find out what you truly know about it, or was this a team effort and you were just a small part of that team. And that's what I found, is that it's usually they're a small part of the team. They did it one time, and so they got it on the resume to try to look good. And so, if you're going to put it on your resume, that's probably the reason why that you're being asked to come in. So you better understand what you have there. And if you're asked if you're an expert at something, and if you say yes, you better be prepared for some major drilling on questions off of that. So be very honest on what your expectations is. And the biggest thing, I think, is if you don't know it, that you will, show what steps you will do to try to find out, an answer to something, and don't try to cover the answer with BS, because the person that's on the other side of the table knows what the answer is that they're asking. So.
That is a shameless plug for tuning in to Gary Chan's that we replayed last week and initially aired in January around just interview best practices. Agree with you, right? Especially if you're putting For example, Splunk doesn't pay me, but right, if I put I'm an expert in Splunk, and you start asking me questions about Splunk, just because the company has it doesn't mean I know how to do it. So, it's easy. Something you think is going to help you in the long run is pretty quick to that it could come back and bite you in the rear if you're asked on it, to do those type of things.
Yeah, I had a guy one time. He, I asked him what his comfort level was for Active Directory, and he said he was a 5. Well, I just sat back in my seat and I just started asking deep, deep questions, and he was squirming. He literally was sweating on it, and I think he got 20% of them right. So it was, if you say you're a 4 or 5 or something on an expert scale, you better be able to answer questions, because that guy thought that I was just going to take his word for it, but then I started digging in and it didn't work well for him. So be careful on those answers. So
yep. I generally try to use as little big words as possible. Less syllables is better, because I feel like a lot of times when you do use verbose vocabularies and things, it's a little bit to the sentiment around the resume, where I feel like you're overinflating or over exaggerating your ability and trying to sound smarter. But there's always somebody smarter is going to blow holes in that, and definitely important.
But don't they say, like, when you're writing something, or write it at a 7th grade level, so that way anyone can understand it in general? So if you're answering questions, like you said, don't make these big words, especially if it's an open-end question, because that might not dawn well for you, and because one, it could sound egotistical if you're doing it, and especially if I'm not a guy of big words. I don't say a lot of big words, mostly because I usually get tongue tied and I can't pronounce them. So I'll be honest,
Same.
So I'm a very simple guy, and I get direct to the point, and so if you're throwing big words off there, you're going to lose me off of it, because I'm going to quit paying attention to you, because you're just, it's like, okay, yeah, he's or she's in their own little world, and you probably won't get the job. So
I think I said piecemeal wrong for about 7 years, and I always called it meal it together. And then I had a coworker that finally just called me on my stuff. I was like, stop using that word. You're doing it wrong. So I finally figured it out. So there was your statement. So I try not to use. I use those quips wrong all the time, and I wound up seeing a TikTok. I guess I know TikTok's bad, but like there was a comedian who did an entire skit on all of the phrases of people say wrong, like irregardless. One that pops in. I've never said that. It's going to stick. Everybody says I could care less, right? Like there's that idea of could care less. It isn't could care less, because if you could, that means you could care less about the situation. So it's could not or couldn't care less, physically can't. But 90% of the people that I ever hear say that phrase, it's always could care less. So it's like buddy, good friend has kind of put that in my brain, and it's always stuck with me. We did have a follow-up question around how to highlight skills. So how would you address, so I'm a college student, how do I address what I learned through coursework, and should I put that in the resume if you know the basics of it? Like that's a great question. Thanks, Peggy.
Yeah, that is a great question. And what I would highlight is that, I'd have a category of coursework, and then in there, here's A, B, C, D, and E that I learned on. I think there's going to be more leniency towards someone that's just coming out of school and putting things that they're putting into it, versus someone that might have worked 1 or 2 years, or even 5 years or more, and says, I worked with McAfee antivirus, or Splunk, or whatever it might be. Then that's that expectation that you have some experience in there, where you should be able to answer some in-depth questions on using it. So I think there is a little bit of leniency, but I would just flat out have a category and say coursework, and then label the technologies that you work with, or the processes. Maybe you did some incident response training, or some basic understanding of MITRE, or whatever it might be, and just highlight it that way, because you're being upfront. and you're not saying I'm an expert off of this. I had coursework on it. Everyone understands that coursework is probably a couple classes of it, and you have a foundational knowledge of it. But be able to go back on your notes and go back and read, on those to where you do, or you can answer some basic foundational questions on those. Don't just say that you did it and then not be able to answer something on it when asked.
So that was a great question, Peggy, and a great answer, Mark, that I'm going to try to put that. I've never heard that question answered in the way that you did. And I know that there are a lot of people that have the same question that Peggy just had. I'm going to try to cut that and spin it out and put it as its own thing. So that was a really good answer to it, I think, for an age-old question of how do you highlight what I learned in a college class, especially in this, right? Because it is, I think of like Peggy's just trying not to get caught up in an interview with you where you start asking questions and blowing holes. Peggy, I appreciate the question. And I'm normally the last question I ask is what advice would you give someone to level up their career? That question was so perfect. We're going to skip that. And that is how to level up your career. 30 minutes always goes fast. So Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. For everybody who's, that jumps in and watches us every week, I've got a great roster of guests over the next 6 weeks. So I'm really excited about it. Next week, we have Brian Gantz. He's with Maryville University, right? I feel like at CyberUp, we've never really, I don't trash any skills path. All skills paths are great, but we're going to dive in a little deeper into maybe to Peggy's question around this idea of what the advantages of degrees versus non-traditional education, right? Because there's value in both. The week after that, we got Montez Fitzpatrick with Navis Healthcare, and then Edgar Acosta out of Denver, Colorado, joins us a couple weeks. So we've got some great guests coming up. Capped off by today with Mark. I appreciate the insight. I appreciate the question and the answer session, and I appreciate you. I really do. So thanks for joining us today, and until next week, I appreciate everybody for listening.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you.